there is a moment in this film, and if you have seen it, you already know exactly which one I mean, where a teenage boy stands on one leg at the edge of the ocean, arms laced like wings, the sun dissolving behind him into a wash of gold and purple, the whole world going quiet around him, and in that single image, without a single word of dialogue, without any explanation at all, this film tells you everything it has been trying to say from the very first frame. It tells you about balance, not the physical kind, the other kind, the kind that takes a lifetime to find, and the fact that a movie from 1984, made on a modest budget, about a kid who learns karate from his apartment's maintenance man, can carry that much weight in a single visual moment. That is the thing I want to talk to you about today. Because here is the thing about this film. It is not really about karate. It never was. It is about something far more universal, far more human, and far more timeless than any sport or fighting discipline could ever be. It is about what happens when you are thrown into a world that does not want you, when the people around you decide you are the target, when everything feels impossible and the adults in your life seem either absent or useless. And then, in the most unexpected place, from the most unexpected person, you find not just a teacher, but a reason to keep going. That is the Karate Kid, and that is why, more than 4 decades after it first appeared on cinema screens across America, it still matters. It still hits. It still makes you feel something real. So, welcome back to the Cine Flux. I'm so glad you are here. Today, we are going deep into one of the most beloved films of the 1980s, a film that was supposed to be a simple underdog sports story and ended up becoming something far more profound, far more tender, and far more enduring than anyone who greenlit it probably expected. We are talking about the original, the one that started everything, the one that still holds up in ways that genuinely surprise you when you go back to it. This is The Karate Kid from 1984. Let us begin. The film was released on June 22nd, 1984, directed by John G. Avildsen, written by Robert Mark Kamen, and produced by Jerry Weintraub for Columbia Pictures. It stars Olaf Macho as Daniel LaRusso, a teenager from Newark, New Jersey, who moved to Reseda, California with his mother, played by Randy Heller, and almost immediately finds himself on the wrong side of a group of karate bullies from the Cobra Kai dojo. The film also stars the extraordinary Pat Morita as Mr. Keisuke Miyagi, Daniel's neighbor and apartment maintenance worker, who turns out to be one of the most quietly gifted martial artists in the valley. And Elizabeth Shue plays Ali Miss, the girl who becomes Daniel's love interest and, in a very real sense, the social ground zero of the conflict that sets everything in motion. The antagonists are led by Johnny Lawrence, played with a kind of cold, leathery arrogance by William Zabka, and behind him stands the truly dangerous presence of John Kreese, his sensei, played by Martin Kove, a man who teaches violence as a philosophy and wraps it in the language of discipline. Now, the director John G. Wilson. That name should sound familiar to you because this was not his first time telling a story about an underdog fighting his way to the top against all odds. Just 8 years before The Karate Kid, Wilson directed a little film called Rocky, the first one, the one that won him the Academy Award for Best Director. So when you understand that context, that the man behind the camera had already proven he knew exactly how to build emotional momentum around a working class hero searching for dignity and self-worth, the DNA of this film starts to make complete sense. Wilson was not just a hired hand on this project. He was a storyteller who understood on a cellular level what it felt like to root for someone who has everything stacked against them. The screenplay was written by Robert Mark Kamen, and here's something worth knowing about that. Kamen did not make this story up from thin air. He drew from his own experiences, his own study of martial arts, his own understanding of what it means to be guided by a genuine master. That personal investment bleeds through every page of the script. It is why the dialogue between Daniel and Mr. Miyagi feels so earned, so layered, so alive. It is not the writing of someone who researched mentorship from the outside. It is the writing of someone who researched mentorship from the outside. It is the writing of someone who understood it from within. At its core, this is a coming of age film, a martial arts film, a friendship film, and a film about what it means to be seen and valued by someone who does not have to care about you but chooses to anyway. It is rated PG, which means it was always intended to speak to younger audiences. But the beauty of it, the thing that makes it so special, is that it speaks just as deeply to adults who have known what it feels like to be lost, to be underestimated, to be the outsider in a world that built its rules before you arrive. When I first sat down with this film, really sat down with it, not as background noise or childhood nostalgia, but as a piece of cinema to be experienced and analyzed, I was struck by how immediately it pulls you into its emotional world. There is no extended setup, no slow architecture building of the plot machinery. Within the first 5 minutes, you know exactly who Daniel is. You feel his excitement at the new apartment complex, the mix of nerves and hope as he tries to make friends, the first spark of connection with Ali, and then, like a cold wave, the sudden arrival of Johnny Lawrence and his friends, and everything shifts. The opening of this spin works because R. Wilson does not waste a single frame on things that do not matter. He is not interested in filling the screen with stylish visuals for their own sake. He is interested in you feeling something about Daniel LaRusso as quickly as possible, and he achieves that with a kind of clean, unpretentious storytelling economy that is actually quite rare. The opening scenes have a warmth to them. The California light, the cheerful apartment complex, the sense of summer possibility, and then the threat enters that warmth, and suddenly the world does not feel safe anymore, and you are right there with Daniel, feeling every bit of that whiplash. I will be honest with you. Going into this revisit, I expected to feel nostalgic. I expected to find the things that I remember loving, the training montages, the final tournament, Mr. Miyagi's quiet wisdom, and I expected those things to feel warm but maybe a little dated, a little simple by contemporary standards. What I did not expect was how genuinely emotionally intelligent this film is, how thoughtful its construction is, how much it trusts its audience, young or old, to feel the subtext without having it explained. Think about it this way: in so many films about mentorship and learning, the mentor is set up as an authority figure from the very beginning. You know immediately that this person is wise and powerful and worth listening to. But this film does something much more interesting. It initially presents Mr. Miyagi as a small, unassuming, slightly eccentric old man who catches flies with chopsticks and tends his bonsai trees and does not seem like anyone important at all. The revelation of who he really is, not just as a martial artist, but as a human being with a history, with grief, with depth, unfolds slowly and quietly and beautifully. And that slowness is not a weakness. It is the film's greatest strength. In comparison to other films of its era, the Rocky films, films like Vision Quest, films like Teen Wolf, The Karate Kid occupies a slightly different space. It has the competitive sport framework of those films, but it carries far more emotional interiority. It is less concerned with the external victory than with the internal transformation, and that distinction is what separates a good sports film from a truly great one. So let us walk through the story together. And I want to do this with the kind of care and attention it deserves, because the structure of this film is more layered than it might first appear. We begin with Daniel LaRusso and his mother Lucille arriving in Rosetta, California, having left their life in Newark, New Jersey behind. Lucille has accepted a new job at a computer company, and the move is full of the complicated emotions that all major life relocations carry: excitement on the surface, anxiety underneath. Daniel is 17. Moving at 17 is one of the loneliest experiences a human being can have. You have already built a world, friends, routines, a sense of belonging, and then suddenly that world is erased, and you are handed a blank page and told to start again. At the apartment complex, Daniel meets Freddy, a kid who seems friendly, and for a moment it looks like the transition might not be so painful after all. He spots Ellie at the beach, and there is an immediate, genuine spark between them. And here the film is very smart, because it establishes the romantic connection and the source of the conflict in the same breath. Johnny Lawrence, Ali's ex-boyfriend, arrives with his friends from the Cobra Kai dojo, and the confrontation is swift, ugly, and humiliating for Daniel. From this point forward, the film's central conflict is established not just as a fight between a new kid and a bully, but as a conflict between two fundamentally different ideas about what it means to be strong. The bullying escalates. It is not casual or cartoonish, it is sustained and specific and genuinely difficult to watch, which is exactly the point. These are not harmless pranks. Johnny and his Cobra Kai companions make Daniel's life miserable in a deliberate, organized way. And this is where the screenplay makes a very sharp choice. It never lets us forget that behind the bullying is a philosophy, an ideology, a worldview taught to these kids by an adult who should have known better. Cobra Kai is not just a dojo. It is a system of beliefs that mistakes cruelty for toughness and domination for discipline. And that distinction will become the moral spine of everything that follows. Enter Mr. Miyagi. Daniel discovers him early one morning, doing a strange flowing exercise on the dock of the apartment complex pool, and the choreography of that discovery is lovely. Daniel, sleepless and anxious, wandering in the early light and finding this quiet, focused figure moving through the air with a grace that seems almost impossible for someone his age. It is a moment of wonder, and the film earns it without fanfare. Mr. Miyagi, we learn, is the apartment's handyman. He fixes things. He grows bonsai trees. He catches flies. He is patient in a way that suggests great depth, and he is kind in a way that does not require explanation. When Daniel is attacked by the Cobra Kai on Halloween night in a brutal, sustained assault that leaves him badly hurt, it is Mr. Miyagi who intervenes, and the scene of that intervention is one of the most quietly extraordinary action sequences of the decade, because it is not flashy. It is not choreographed to impress. Mr. Miyagi disables five trained karate students in about 30 seconds with a kind of effortless, precise calm that is more frightening in its own way than any amount of aggression could ever be. He is not performing. He is simply doing what needs to be done, and then he stops. From this moment, the film enters its most beloved phase, the training sequence. Mr. Miyagi agrees to speak to the Cobra Kai sensei, John Kreese, and negotiates a truce. Daniel will be left alone until the All Valley Karate Championship, where he will compete against the Cobra Kai students on equal terms. This is an extraordinary piece of storytelling because it is both completely logical within the film's world and quietly absurd, which is part of its charm. A 40-something maintenance man walking into a dojo and negotiating a formal truce on behalf of a teenager he has known for a few weeks. It only works because Pat Morita makes it work, and then the training begins. And here is where the film does something absolutely iconic, something that has entered the cultural bloodstream so deeply that even people who have never seen this film know the phrase wax on, wax off. Daniel arrives expecting to learn karate. Mr. Miyagi gives him chores. He makes Daniel wax his cars using a specific circular motion. He makes him sand the deck. He makes him paint the fence. He makes him paint the house. And Daniel understandably is furious. He feels used, taken advantage of, made into a free laborer under the pretense of training. And then Mr. Miyagi shows him. He throws a punch, and Daniel's arms come up instinctively in the exact pattern of wax on, wax off. Another punch, sand the floor, fence paint side to side, house paint up and down. The muscle memory is already there. The blocks are already built into his body. He was learning karate all along. I want you to pause on that for a second, because that moment is not just a clever plot reveal. It is the film's central philosophical statement delivered through action, and it is the statement about the nature of learning itself. The greatest lessons, this film argues, do not always look like lessons when you are inside them. Growth does not always announce itself. The most important things you are learning might look from the outside like something else entirely. The story builds steadily toward the tournament, and along the way, it deepens both relationships. Daniel's growing bond with Mr. Miyagi and Daniel's budding romance with Ali. There is a beautiful detour to a Japanese restaurant where we get the first glimpse of Mr. Miyagi's grief. His wife and son died in a World War II internment camp while he was fighting for the United States Army, and that single revelation changes the entire emotional register of the film. This is not just a story about a boy learning karate. It is a story about two lonely people, separated by decades and experience, finding in each other exactly what they needed. The tournament sequence is where the film's pacing shifts into a higher gear. It is tense, it is exciting, and it is emotionally satisfying in the way that only a well built story can be. The famous crane kick, the move that Mr. Miyagi has been hinting at and that Daniel has been practicing in secret, lands at the exact moment the film needs it most. And the final image of Daniel, arm raised champion, is one of the great triumphant closing shots of its decade. Now let us talk about what this film gets absolutely, undeniably right. And there is quite a lot to say here. Let us start with the performances because they are the foundation upon which everything else is built. Ralph Macchio as Daniel LaRusso is one of the great underappreciated performances in 1980s American cinema. And I want to be specific about why. Because it is easy to take what he does for granted, because it looks so natural, so unforced, so effortlessly real. Macchio was 22 years old when this film was made, playing a 17-year-old, and not for a single frame does the artifice show. He inhabits Daniel with a particular kind of wounded earnestness that is very difficult to fake. The frustration, the embarrassment, the desperate desire to fit in, the anger that keeps surfacing because there is no appropriate outlet for it, all of this is alive and specific in every scene. What struck me most about his performance is the way he handles the quieter scenes. Not the confrontations, not the tournament, but the scenes where Daniel is simply sitting with Mr. Miyagi, talking, learning, existing in someone else's company. Those scenes require a kind of receptive, open vulnerability that is genuinely hard to maintain on camera. Marco never seems like he is performing. He seems like he's just being Daniel, and that simplicity is a craft unto itself. The specific scene that proves this beyond any doubt for me is the scene where Mr. Miyagi tells Daniel about his wife and child. Daniel is sitting across from this man he is coming to love, listening to something devastating. A story of loss so profound that it reshapes everything you thought you understood about Mr. Miyagi, and the camera is on Makio's face for much of it. What he does in that scene is nothing dramatic. He does not have any big reaction, no speech, no breakdown. He just listens. And somehow, in that listening, you feel every pound of what is being said. The intelligence of that choice, the restraint of it, speaks to an actor who understood the scene completely. But let us be honest. The performance that most people remember from this film, the one that carries its emotional weight more than any other, is Pat Morita as Mr. Miyagi, and it is not hyperbole to say that this is one of the finest performances in American cinema of the 1980s, full stop. Morita was known at the time primarily for his comedic work, particularly his role as Arnold in Happy Days, and there was genuine skepticism, including from the studio, about whether he was the right choice for a role that required such deep emotional gravity. The casting sessions were long, and Morita had to fight for the role in a way that, with the benefit of hindsight, seems almost tragically ironic, because it is almost impossible now to imagine anyone else playing it. What Morita does with Mr. Miyagi is create a character of profound complexity without ever seeming to try. He uses economy of gesture and stillness in a way that recalls great classical acting. Every movement of his hands, every shift of his expression, every carefully timed pause carries information. Mr. N. Miyagi is not a character who explains himself, he is a character who reveals himself gradually through action and behavior and the occasional sentence that lands like a stone in still water. The scene that proves Murta's greatness beyond all reasonable doubt is the birthday scene. The scene where Mr. Miyagi gets drunk on sake and Daniel finds him weeping, and Miyagi, in his drunkenness, begins to tell Daniel about his wife. he says in a voice so quiet you have to lean toward the screen to hear it, that his wife was pregnant and in a camp in Colorado Third Mountain, the internment camp where Japanese Americans were held during World War II while he was fighting for the United States Army in Italy, winning medals for a country that had imprisoned his family, and she died. And their child was stillborn, and he never went back to Japan. In Morita's hands, that moment is devastating. There is no melodrama in it, no reaching for effect. The grief is just there, honest and huge, underneath everything. And the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences recognized that, nominating Morita for the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor, the first person of Asian descent to be nominated in that category in more than 2 decades. He did not win. That remains, to my mind, one of the more unjust oversights in Oscar history. Elizabeth Shua as Ali brings a warmth and an intelligence to a role that could easily have been reduced to a simple love interest function. She makes Ali a full person, someone with her own social pressures, her own family dynamics, her own reasons for being attracted to Daniel that go beyond the surface. The scene where Ali and Daniel are at the beach, talking and laughing for the first time, has a natural chemistry that feels unscripted, and that ease between Makio and Shu gives the romantic thread of the film an emotional authenticity that makes you root for them genuinely. And William Sabga as Johnny Lawrence deserves more credit than he usually receives. Sabga plays Johnny not as a cartoonish villain, but as a kid who has been shaped and possibly damaged by an ideology of cruelty that he absorbed before he was old enough to question it. There are moments in Johnny's performance, small moments, flickers of doubt, a look that suggests something more complicated beneath the aggression, that foreshadow the extraordinary art his character would eventually get to complete decades later in Cobra Kai. Sabka knew from the beginning that Johnny was not simply evil, he was lost. Moving from the performances to the screenplay itself, what Robert Mark Kamen delivers here is one of the great examples of a familiar structure executed with genuine craft and emotional intelligence. The underdog sports story is one of the oldest narrative shapes in American cinema. Boy encounters obstacle, boy finds mentor, boy trains, boy faces test, boy overcomes. The audience knows this shape. They have known it since before this film existed, and the film knows they know it. So what makes it work? What makes it work so well that people are still talking about it 4 decades later is not the shape itself, but the extraordinary richness of what is placed inside the shape. The screenplay's greatest structural achievement is the parallel between Daniel's external journey and Mr. Miyagi's internal one. Daniel comes to the film carrying the weight of displacement, of loneliness, of vulnerability. He needs strength. Mr. Miyagi comes to the film carrying something we do not initially see, a grief so deep it has shaped his entire relationship with living. He needs connection, purpose, a reason to pass on what he knows. The genius of the screenplay is that these two needs are perfectly matched, and the film allows both of them to be behave simultaneously, even though the story is nominally Daniel's. The dialogue throughout is remarkably measured. Carmen does not over-explain. The famous aphorisms, Garit is not about fighting, it's about not fighting. First learn balance. Man who walk on road walk safe. Man who walk off road think he know better, fall in ditch. These are not delivered as inspirational speeches. They are dropped into conversation naturally, casually, the way a genuinely wise person shares insight, without fanfare, without underlining. And because they are not underlined, they go in deeper. They become part of how you think about the film after you leave it. The pacing of the screenplay is particularly well judged. The first act establishes the world and the conflict with theme efficiency. The second act, the training period, takes its time, and wisely so. This is where the real film lives. The tournament sequence in the third arrives exactly when the emotional engine is at its fullest, and Kamen structures it with the kind of escalating stakes and last-minute complications that keep your chest tight from beginning to end. The illegal kick to Daniel's knee by Bobby on Chris's orders is a genuine gut punch. Not because of the violence, but because of what it reveals about the philosophy that the Cobra Kai sensei has been teaching all along. there is a moment in the tournament after Daniel has been hurt and it looks like he cannot continue, where Mr. Miyagi performs a healing technique on his injured knee. It is a brief moment, perhaps 45 seconds, and Kamen does not explain it. He does not have anyone ask, "How did you do that?" He does not justify it or ground it in medical reality. He simply presents it as something Mr. Miyagi can do because of who he is and then moves on. That restraint, the willingness not to explain, is a hallmark of great screenplay writing. It trusts the audience. It trusts that you have already learned enough about Mr. Miyagi to accept the unexplained. The bold choice the screenplay makes at the very end, having Daniel win not with a conventional technique but with the crane kick, a move that is technically illegal if it misses and looks, frankly, a little absurd out of context, is exactly the right choice because the crane kick is not there to be pragmatic. It is there to be symbolic. It is the move Mr. Miyagi specifically asked him about at the beach. It is the move he practiced alone. It is a leap of faith, quite literally. And when it lands, the film lands with it. Now let us talk about how Jornji Avistan shoots this thing. Because the visual language of this film is, I think, significantly underappreciated. Avistan does not make flashy films. His visual approach is not about bravura camera moves or avant-garde framing. His style is rooted in classical Hollywood storytelling. Clean compositions, purposeful movement, a camera that serves the story rather than competing with it, and in the context of this particular story, that modesty is the right choice. Because the story's power comes from its emotional honesty, not from visual spectacle, and a more showy directorial approach would have undermined that honesty. That said, there are moments of genuine visual beauty in this film that deserve attention. The Sunset Beach scene, where Daniel stands on the dock practicing the crane kick, is one of them. Wilson frames Daniel against the horizon with a simplicity that makes it look effortless, but is actually the product of precise compositional thinking. The silhouette of a boy, balanced on one leg against the vast open sky. It is an image that carries the entire thematic weight of the film in a single frame. Balance, openness, the beauty of what is not yet completed. The training montages use location with intelligence. The deck that Daniel sends, the fence that he paints, the cars that he waxes, these are not generic studio sets. They are specific, textured, lived in spaces that feel like Mr. Miyagi's actual world, and that specificity matters because it grounds the fantastical elements of the story in physical reality. We believe in this training because we believe in this place, and we believe in this place because the photography treats it with genuine attention. The cinematography by James Craby uses natural California light throughout, with a warmth and an openness that gives the film its visual personality. The colors are not oversaturated or stylized, they are the honest colors of Southern California in summer, gold and blue, and the faded pastels of suburban architecture. And that honesty in the color palette serves the story beautifully because this is a film about real things happening to a real person, and the photography says so in every frame. The tournament sequence is shot with a very specific visual glamour, tight close ups on faces, alternating with wider shots that establish spatial relationships within the ring. Wilson uses cross cutting between Daniel and Mr. Miyagi during the fights to maintain the emotional through line of their relationship even in the midst of athletic action. Every time the film cuts to Mr. Miyagi's face watching Daniel compete, we are reminded that the tournament is not really about karate. It is about a man watching a boy he has come to love prove something to himself. The fight choreography is honest in a way that martial arts films of the era often were not. There is no wire work, no impossible acrobatics, no superhuman displays. The karate in this film looks like karate that real teenagers who have been training for a few months might actually perform, and that realism gives the final tournament a physicality and urgency that more stylized action would not have been able to achieve. When Daniel gets hurt, it looks like it hurts. When he wins, it looks like something that was genuinely earned rather than inevitable. Turning to the music, Bill Conti's score for this film is one of the great unsung achievements of 1980s film composition. Conti had previously scored Rocky, another John Avildsen film, and he brings a similar understanding of how music should function in underdog narrative. The score knows exactly when to pull back and let the silence speak, and it knows when to swell up and carry you forward on a wave of emotion. The main theme is instantly recognizable and immediately evocative of a very specific feeling. The feeling of something beginning, of potential gathering itself, of a journey about to be undertaken with no clear idea of where it leads. It is a melody of aspiration, not triumph, which is exactly right for a film whose emotional center is about the process of becoming rather than the fact of having arrived. But the score's most important work happens in the quieter moments. During the training sequences, the music is light and curious, slightly playful, which matches the gentle absurdity of a teenager waxing a car as martial arts instruction. During the emotional scenes between Daniel and Mr. Miyagi, particularly the birthday scene, the story of the internment camp, the quiet evenings on the porch, the score retreats almost entirely, trusting the performances and the silences to carry the weight. The film also benefited enormously from its needle drop soundtrack, which captures the specific sonic texture of early 1980s American youth culture with an accuracy that almost functions as a time capsule. You're the Best by Joe Esposito, which plays over the tournament sequence, is one of those perfect merges of song and scene that you cannot imagine undone. What is fascinating to know about that song is that it was originally written and recorded for Rocky 3. It was meant to appear over the famous training montage in that film, but was passed over in favor of another track. It found its true home here, and it is one of those cases where a piece of music sounds as though it was specifically written for the moment it eventually scored. The sound design throughout the film supports the story with an intelligence that goes unnoticed precisely because it works so well. The crack of karate strikes, the sound of Daniel's labored breathing during training, the particular ambient sound of the tournament arena, all of these audio textures are carefully constructed to keep you physically present in the world of the film, feeling the weight and impact of everything that is happening. Now, the action in this film is modest by the standards of what was coming later in the decade. This was before the era of Hong Kong influenced wire work and CGI enhancement transformed Western action cinema, but it is effective and honest and serves the story exactly as it should. The fight sequences are choreographed by Pat E. Johnson, a world champion karate competitor who worked with actors 4 months before filming began. The goal was not to make the karate look superhuman or theatrical. The goal was to make it look real, and specifically, to make it look like the particular level of real that the story required, which is to say competent teenage karate versus genuinely masterful adult karate. The contrast between Johnny's flashy, aggressive Cobra style and Daniel's more defensive, patient Miyagi-Do approach is written into the choreography of every fight, and it is a physical translation of the film's thematic content. Cobra Kai attacks, Miyagi-Do redacts. Cobra Kai strikes first, Miyagi-Do waits. The fighting styles are not just different martial arts techniques, they are different philosophies made physical, and watching the tournament with that understanding in mind changes the entire experience of it. Ralph Macchio trained extensively for the role, and his commitment to the physical work shows in the credibility of his performance during the fight sequences. He is not a natural athlete in the conventional cinematic sense. He is not built like an action hero, and the film knows it and uses that knowledge wisely. Daniel winning the tournament does not feel like the natural order of things reasserting itself. It feels like an upset, a genuine surprise, and that surprise is part of what makes the ending so emotionally satisfying. Now, let us talk about where this film falls short, because I believe in being honest and complete in every review I bring to this channel, and this film, beloved as it is, has some genuine weaknesses worth examining. The most significant issue with The Karate Kid is its treatment of the Cobra Kai characters, with the notable exception of Johnny Lawrence. The rest of the Cobra Kai students, Bobby, Tommy, Dutch, Jimmy, are largely interchangeable. They function as a collective threat rather than as individual characters, and this flatness means that the film's critique of Cobra Kai's philosophy never fully lands at the level of its individual members. We understand that the training has made them into bullies, but we do not understand how or why any of them individually came to be where they are. They are villains by association, and in a film that is otherwise so interested in the complexity of character, this represents a missed opportunity. The romance between Daniel and Ali, while warm and genuinely sweet, follows a fairly predictable trajectory and never quite gets to explore the social dimensions of their relationship in the depth that would have been possible. Ali comes from a wealthy Encino family. Daniel is working class and new to California. The film gestures at this class divide. There is a scene at a country club that highlights it, but it never fully reckons with what that difference means for them or tests their relationship against it in a serious way. It is threat that is picked up and then gently set aside. There are also a handful of pacing issues in the second act, particularly in the middle portion of the training sequences. Some of the core-based training scenes, while thematically rich, run slightly long without adding new emotional information, and the film occasionally loses momentum in these passages in a way that a tighter edit might have prevented. These are minor complaints, genuinely, and they do not significantly damage the overall experience, but they are real, and a film this good deserves honest examination. The character of Lucille, Daniel's mother, is underwritten in a way that slightly weakens the family dynamic. She is present mostly as a source of cheerful support and comic relief, and the film never really explores what the move to California has cost her, or what her relationship with Daniel's absent father might be, or how she experiences watching her son struggle to find his footing. Randy Heller does fine work with what she is given, but what she is given is not very much. Finally, there is a slight tonal inconsistency in the film's treatment of John Trees. He is established in the final act as genuinely menacing, someone capable of ordering his students to deliberately injure a competitor, which is not the behavior of a merely stern disciplinarian, but of a genuinely dangerous person. But the film does not quite follow through on the implications of this revelation. Chris faces no real consequences. He is humiliated by Mr. Miyagi in the parking lot after the tournament, and that is the end of it. For a film that takes the question of how a bad ideology can corrupt young people seriously, the resolution of its primary architect of that ideology feels slightly insufficient. These are the film's genuine weaknesses, and I name them not to diminish what is extraordinary about it, but because honest criticism requires seeing the whole picture, not just the parts that shine. Let us spend some time behind the scenes of this film, because the story of how the Karate Kid was made is almost as compelling as the film itself. The screenplay came from a place of genuine personal experience. Robert Mark Kamen, who wrote the script, was himself a practitioner of Goju-ryu karate, and the film's central philosophy, the idea that martial arts properly taught is fundamentally about inner strength, self-control, and the avoidance of violence rather than its perpetuation, reflects his own training and understanding. He has spoken in interviews about being beaten up as a young man and seeking out martial arts instruction as a result, and the emotional truth of that experience lives in every scene between Daniel and Mr. Miyagi. This was not research, this was autobiography filtered through fiction. The casting of the lead role was not as straightforward as the final result might suggest. The studio and producer saw a very large number of young actors for the role of Daniel LaRusso, and among those considered were Sean Penn and Charlie Sheen, both of whom were building serious Hollywood profiles at the time. Penn, in particular, would have brought a very different energy to the role, more confrontational, more urban, less open. The decision to cast Ralph Macchio was, in retrospect, obviously right, but it was not an obvious decision at the time. Macchio had the particular quality of looking young and vulnerable even at 22, and that physical quality was essential to making Daniel's journey believable. Pat Morita's path to Mr. Miyagi was perhaps the most fraught of any casting story in the film's history. Morita was perceived by many in the industry as a comedic performer. His years on Happy Days had locked him in that category in the minds of studio executives, and there was significant resistance to the idea that he could carry the emotional weight the role required. Morita, who himself of Japanese American heritage and who had spent time in an internment camp as a child, brought to the role something no amount of research or preparation could have provided, a lived connection to the specific grief that Mr. Miyagi carries. When Miyagi weeps for his wife who died in Hard Mountain, Morita is drawing on something real. You can feel it. The preparation for the film's physical sequences was extensive. Pat E. Johnson, the martial arts coordinator, worked with Ralph McQuay for months to build the physical vocabulary Daniel needed. McHugh went from having essentially no martial arts background to being able to perform the tournament sequences convincingly, and the specificity of the techniques on screen reflects that preparation. The crane kick in particular required precise timing and balance, and the version that appears in the film is a genuinely difficult movement to execute. It is not a special effect, it is something Makio learned to do. No, the filming took place largely at real locations in the greater Los Angeles area. The apartment complex used in the film is a real apartment complex in Reseda, and much of the early location work was done in the San Fernando Valley. This choice to shoot on location rather than build sets gives the film a physical authenticity that is part of why it holds up so well visually. These are real places with real textures and real light, and the camera's relationship to them is honest. John G. Averson's editing approach was notably disciplined. He had a specific vision of the film's rhythm and maintained it through the edit in a way that resisted the studio's occasional suggestions for a faster, more action-heavy cut. The film that was released is, in large part, the film that Avildsen intended to make, and that creative autonomy shows in the consistency of tone from beginning to end. One of the more fascinating pieces of production trivia concerns the soundtrack. The song "You're the Best", which is one of the most emotionally charged moments in the entire film, was originally written and produced for Rocky 3 and was reportedly passed over at the last moment in favor of Eye of the Tiger by Survivor. Finding its way to the Karate Kid transformed it from a rejected song into one of the definitive musical moments of the decade. It is a reminder that sometimes what looks like a setback leads you exactly where you are supposed to end up, which is, of course, precisely the moral of the film it ended up in. The production's budget was a modest $8 million. By the standards of summer blockbusters, even in 1984, this was a conservative number, and the film was not expected to be a major commercial success. It was positioned as a family-friendly sports drama, the kind of film that might do decent business and then find its real life on home video. What happened instead was something no one predicted. Let us talk about what happened at the box office, because the commercial story of The Karate Kid is one of the great surprise success stories of its era. The film opened on June 22, 1984, with an opening weekend of approximately $5 million. In the landscape of summer 1984, which included Ghostbusters, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, Gremlins, and Splash, this was a quiet opening, the kind that does not set the industry on fire. But then something happened that is rarer than a massive opening weekend. The film stayed. Week after week, it kept drawing audiences. The word of mouth was extraordinary. People who saw it told their friends, who told their families, who told their children, who told their classmates. The film's legs, the ratio of its total gross to its opening weekend, were remarkable. By the time its theatrical run concluded, The Karate Kid had earned approximately $90 million at the domestic box office against its $8 million production budget. That is a return of more than 11 times the investment. In any era, that is a stunning result, and it was achieved almost entirely through audience enthusiasm rather than marketing spent or blockbuster spectacle. On Midos, the film carries an 88% approval rating from critics, with a consensus noting it as utterly predictable and wholly of its time, but warm, sincere, and difficult to resist. The Metacritic score of 60 out of 100 reflects the somewhat more mixed initial critical response from the publication outlets indexed there. Some critics found the film formulaic and sentimental in a way that felt manipulative. But audience scores tell a different story, and the film's IMDb rating of 7.2 reflects an enduring affection that 4 decades have not eroded. the gap between the Metacritic score and the audience response is instructive, and I think it reflects something fundamental about what professional critics prioritize versus what film audiences are actually looking for. The critics who were mixed on the film were largely responding to its structural predictability, and they were not wrong that the story follows a well worn path. But the audiences who loved it were responding to something the critics sometimes undervalued: the sincerity of its emotional delivery, the warmth of its performances, the genuine craft of its human drama. These are not lesser virtues, they are in many ways the harder achievements. At the Academy Awards, that Morita received a Best Supporting Actor nomination, which remains one of the most deserved nominations that category has seen. The film also won the Young Artist Award for Best Family Motion Picture Drama, and William Zabka received a nomination in the Best Young Supporting Actor category. These recognitions were modest by Hollywood standards, but they pointed towards something the industry was beginning to understand: that this film was not just a commercial success, it was a cultural event. And here is where we need to talk about the franchise. Because The Karate Kid did not stay a single film for long, and its legacy as a franchise is one of the more interesting stories in the history of cinema's relationship with its own successes. The commercial triumph of the original film led quickly to sequels. The Karate Kid Part 2 arrived in 1986, taking Daniel and Mr. Miyagi to Okinawa, Japan, and expanding the mythology of Miyagi's personal history in ways that enriched the original film retroactively. It was a success, though a somewhat lesser one in terms of critical response, and it confirmed that audiences' attachment to Daniel and Mr. Miyagi was strong enough to sustain further chapters. Part 3 arrived in 1989 and brought the Cobra Kai conflict back to the foreground, this time in a darker and less critically beloved form. The next Karate Kid, in 1994, attempted to pass the baton by introducing a new protagonist, Julie Bias, played by Hilary Swank in an early major role, but it did not find the same audience connection and effectively ended the original cycle. A 2010 remake relocated the story to Beijing, China, cast Jaden Smith as the protagonist and Jackie Chan as the mentor figure, and performed extremely well commercially, earning $176 million domestically and $359 million worldwide against the $40 million budget. The remake received warmer critical notices than many expected, largely on the strength of Chan's performance, though it exists in a somewhat separate conversation from the original. But the most remarkable chapter in the franchise's story came in 2018, when Cobra Kai launched as a YouTube original series before moving to Netflix, and did something genuinely unprecedented. It took actors from a 34-year-old film and not only brought them back, but used the passage of time to enrich them in ways the original could never have anticipated. The series reconsidered the story from Johnny Lawrence's perspective, asking the audience to reconsider who was the hero and who was the villain, and in doing so, it created one of the most surprisingly intelligent long form continuations of a beloved film property in the history of popular culture. It ran for 6 seasons, found a massive global audience, and proved that the emotional territory of the Karate Kid, questions of mentorship, identity, the cost of the choices we make when we are young, was not exhausted in 1984. It was, if anything, inexhaustible. Where does the original film rank within this franchise? Unquestionably first. It is the irreplaceable one, the film that created the emotional investment upon which everything else that followed was able to draw. Without the original Karate Kid's perfect rendering of the Daniel Miyagi relationship, nothing in the franchise that followed would have worked. The sequels and the revival series are all, in one way or other, in conversation with what happened here in 1984, and none of them can fully replicate it, because what happened here was a specific kind of first love. The first time you meet these characters, the first time you meet these characters, the first time you hear wax on, wax off, the first time the cream kick lands, and you only get that once. Now let us go deeper. Let us talk about what this film is actually about beneath the surface, because the themes and symbolic structures of The Karate Kid are richer than the film's reputation as a beloved crowd pleaser sometimes suggests. The most obvious theme is the one the film announces openly: the relationship between discipline and character, between outward skill and inward development. Mr. Miyagi's teaching philosophy, as articulated throughout the film, is fundamentally about this distinction. The Cobra Kai dojo teaches karate as a tool of domination. Strike fast, strike hard, no mercy is their motto, and it is not just a fighting philosophy, it is a worldview, a set of values, a way of being in relation to other people. Chris has taken the discipline of martial arts and stripped it of its philosophical and ethical dimensions, leaving only the technique and the aggression. He has created skilled fighters who have no internal compass. He has created weapons. Mr. Miyagi teaches the opposite. His instruction begins not with fighting at all, but with work, the chores, the physical labor that builds muscle memory without the student realizing it is happening. And crucially, he never once teaches Daniel to attack. Everything he teaches is deflection, redirection, protection. The Miyagi-Do style, as it comes to be known in the franchise, is fundamentally a philosophy of non-aggression that nevertheless leaves you completely capable of defending yourself. It is not weakness, it is discipline of a higher order. The discipline not to use force when force is available to you. This distinction maps onto something deeper about different approaches to power. The Cobra Kai model of power is extractive. It takes from others, it dominates, it depends on the submission of someone else for its satisfaction. The Miyagi model of power is generative. It grows from within. It does not require an opponent to validate itself, and its ultimate expression is not in defeating others, but in the ability to choose not to. This is a profound philosophical distinction, and the fact that the film makes it through action and character rather than through dialogue or lecture is a mark of genuine storytelling intelligence. The theme of mentorship is equally central and equally rich. The relationship between Daniel and Mr. Miyagi is not a conventional teacher student dynamic, and the film is careful to show why. Mr. Miyagi does not set himself up as an authority figure. He does not demand deference. He earns trust slowly, through consistency, through kindness, through a willingness to be present that goes well beyond what any professional obligation would require. He fixes Daniel's bike, he takes him to the tournament. He celebrates his birthday with him alone because Daniel has nowhere else to be. The relationship between them is in many ways more parental than pedagogical. It has the quality of adoption of a man and a boy choosing each other in the absence of other options and finding, in that choosing, something irreplaceable. The recurring symbolism of balance in the film is worth examining closely. Balance is both a literal martial arts requirement, you cannot execute the crane kick without physical balance, and the film's central metaphor for psychological and emotional health. Daniel, at the start of the film, is deeply unbalanced. He reacts impulsively. He is knocked off center by every difficulty. He cannot find his footing in the new world he has been placed in. Mr. Miyagi's teaching is at its deepest level, a teaching about how to find and maintain your center regardless of what is happening around you. The crane kick at the end of the film is the ultimate test of that teaching. One leg, no certainty about what will happen next, everything depending on balance and commitment. The film also engages with questions of cultural identity in ways that are more nuanced than its general reputation suggests. Mr. Miyagi is a Japanese American man navigating a country that imprisoned his family during wartime. The story of the internment camps, Heart Mountain, Colorado, where Miyagi's wife and child died, is told in a single scene, but it is told with enough specificity and emotional weight to completely reframe who Mr. Miyagi is and why he is the way he is. His patience, his non aggression, his deep commitment to the ethical dimensions of martial arts practice, all of this can be read as a response to history in which violence and injustice were visited upon him and his family by the very country he had chosen to serve. He does not become bitter. He does not become violent. He becomes more patient, more careful, more insistent on the difference between genuine strength and mere force. That is not a small thing, that is a life's work. Thinking about the cultural impact of this film, it is difficult to know where to begin because the reach of the Karate Kid into the cultural fabric of the English-speaking world and well beyond it is extraordinary for what was, in origin, a modest family sports drama. The most immediate and measurable cultural impact was on enrollment in martial arts schools across America. In the months and years following the film's release, karate schools reported significant increases in new student applications, and specifically in younger students whose interest had been directly inspired by watching Daniel LaRusso's journey. This was not the first time a film had caused a martial arts surge. Bruce Lee's films had done something similar in the 1970s, but the Karate Kid surge was distinctive because it was driven not by the cool factor of martial arts action, but by the film's presentation of what martial arts training could do for a young person's character and self esteem. People were not just enrolling because they wanted to learn to fight, they were enrolling because they wanted a Mr. Miyagi. The phrase wax on, wax off entered the cultural lexicon almost immediately after the film's release and has never really left. It is used in contexts far removed from martial arts, in business, in education, in any situation where the point is being made that the preparation for something important might not immediately look like preparation at all. The concept it encodes, that real learning is often disguised, that the most important skills are often built indirectly, that trust in a process or a teacher can unlock things you did not know you were developing, is genuinely useful, and the film's elegant dramatization of it gave the language a lasting cultural anchor. The film's influence on the portrayal of Asian characters in American cinema deserves explicit recognition. Mr. Miyagi represented a significant departure from the stereotyped, diminished, or comedically marginalized roles that Asian actors had historically been offered in Hollywood films. He was three-dimensional, dignified, powerful, grieving, wise, and funny in a way that was never condescending. But Morita's Academy Award nomination was not just a recognition of his individual performance, it was an acknowledgement that Asian American characters could and should occupy the emotional center of mainstream American films. The impact of that representation in the cultural context of 1984 America cannot be overstated. For the conversation the film sparked about bullying was also culturally significant in its moment. The early 1980s were not a period when schools and parents had the institutional vocabulary around bullying that has since developed, and The Karate Kid was one of the mainstream cultural artifacts that helped shift the conversation. It made clear with emotional precision what it feels like to be on the receiving end of sustained organized harassment, and it named Creasy's complicity as an adult who not only permitted but actively encouraged his students' worst behavior. The film's moral clarity on this point was not simplistic. It was necessary. Decades later, the launch of Cobra Kai on Netflix brought a new generation to the original film and created a genuinely remarkable multi-generational cultural conversation. Young people who had never seen the 1984 film found themselves compelled to watch it after falling in love with the series. Original fans who had grown up with the film found their understanding of it complicated and enriched by the series' willingness to interrogate who the hero really was. The franchise became, in a sense, a continuing conversation about the stories we tell ourselves about our own lives, about who we were when we were young, about whether the people we thought were villains had more going on than we could see from where we stood when we were young. And that is perhaps the most extraordinary measure of what the Karate Kid accomplished, not just in 1984, but in the 4 decades that followed. It did not simply give audiences a film they enjoyed, it gave them a frame through which to re examine their own stories, their own memories, their own understanding of who was the hero and who was the villain in the chapters of their lives that they had already written and filed away. Cobra Kai, which launched as a YouTube original in 2018 before migrating to Netflix, did something that television almost never successfully achieves. It returned to a beloved, finished cultural artifact and added to it without diminishing it. It took characters who had been simple in 1984 and made them complex. It took a story that seemed complete and revealed it had only just begun. And it did all of this while remaining in genuine conversation with the original film, treating every scene from 1984 as sacred text, as evidence in an ongoing argument about memory and perspective and the stories we construct about our own lives. The series ran for 6 full seasons, concluding in February 2025, and over those 6 seasons, it built one of the most surprisingly sophisticated explorations of how the lessons we absorb in adolescence, the philosophies and loyalties and wounds and triumphs of our teenage years, continue to shape who we are long after we believe we have moved past them. Johnny Lawrence, the villain of 1984, became the co-protagonist of Cobra Kai, and in his hands, or rather in Willem Zabka's hands, the story of the Karate Kid was cracked open and turned toward the light at a different angle, and what you saw inside it when the light had differently was something genuinely astonishing. Every day faced an inch of limit. Every day reached an inch of our limit. But it's our limit. It's not. And the 2025 film Karate Kid Legends continued the franchise into yet another generation, connecting the world of the original film with the 2010 remake's protagonist, Li Fong, played by Ben Wang, under the mentorship of an aging Daniel LaRusso. The franchise breathes on. The conversation continues. Because the questions the Karate Kid asked in 1984, what does it mean to be strong? What does it mean to be taught? What does it mean to choose patience over aggression in a world that rewards aggression? Have not stopped being relevant. They will not stop being relevant. They are questions that every generation must answer for itself, and this film will be waiting for each new generation that arrives at them. That is the cultural gift of this film, and that is the Cine Flux. But we are not done yet. Alright, from this point on, we are going into full spoiler territory. If you have not seen the movie yet, this is your warning. Pause, go watch it, and come back. You will thank me later. Still with me? Good. Let us go all the way in, all the way down to the marrow of what this film is made of. The first thing I want to examine in full spoiler depth is the Halloween attack, because it is a scene that the film handles with a raw, unflinching honesty that many analyses of this movie pass over too quickly, and it deserves serious attention. Daniel has dressed as a shower for the Halloween party, a homemade costume, goofy and endearing, and slightly desperate in the way that all homemade costumes carry the fingerprints of a person trying too hard to fit in. And there is something in that costume, in the choice of it, that tells you exactly where Daniel is emotionally at this point in the story. He is still trying, he is still reaching toward normalcy, toward belonging, toward the idea that this new life could be okay. He has not yet given up. And then Tony Lawrence and the Cobra Kai arrive and the film does something genuinely uncomfortable. It does not cut away from what happens, it makes you watch. Huh. What follows is not a scuffle or a schoolyard confrontation blown slightly out of proportion. It is a deliberate, coordinated assault on a single defenseless boy by 5 trained martial artists who have been, in the most literal sense of the word, weaponized by their instructor. Daniel does not provoke this, he does not escalate it. He tries to leave, and they pursue him to a darkened soccer field, and they do not stop until he is on the ground and badly hurt. The camera stays with him in the aftermath, and the image of Daniel lying in the dirt in his shower costume is one of the more quietly devastating images in the film because of the contrast it contains between the comedy of the costume and the seriousness of the damage, between what he was trying to do tonight and what was done to him instead. And this is where the film makes its most important moral argument, which it will continue to develop all the way to the final frame. What happened to Daniel on that Halloween night was not the result of teenage aggression or random cruelty. It was the result of a philosophy deliberately taught, consciously nurtured by an adult who knew exactly what he was producing. John Kreese did not accidentally create students who would do this. He created them on purpose. Strike first, strike hard, no mercy is not just a tenement philosophy. It is a complete ethics of human interaction, and in the hands of teenagers who have no countervailing influence, it produces exactly this. 5 boys in the dark, pursuing one boy who cannot fight back, and not stopping until the damage is done. This is the moral spine of the film, not the crane kick, not the tournament, this moment. Because everything that follows, every lesson Miyagi teaches, every value he embodies, every choice Daniel makes in the ring is in direct response to the question this moment raises. What do you do when you have encountered a philosophy of cruelty? Do you become it in return? Do you find a more powerful version of the same thing and fight fire with fire? Or do you find something deeper, something more durable, something that does not require an opponent's submission to sustain itself? Mr. Miyagi's answer to that question is the film's answer to that question, and his intervention in the Halloween scene is the physical demonstration of that answer. Delivered before a single word of it has been spoken, he is simply there. The camera does not show us his arrival. One moment Daniel is being assaulted, and the next moment there is a small, quiet man in work clothes standing in the dark, and within seconds all five Cobra Kai students are on the ground, and it is over. No drama, no display, no lingering to be admired. He does what is necessary and he stops. Because doing only what is necessary and then stopping, never more, never for show, never to prove a point, is the whole of what he has been trying to live for 30 years. The negotiation scene with Chris deserves close attention because what happens in it is psychologically precise. Mr. Miyagi walks into the Cobra Kai dojo alone. He is small, he is older, he is dressed in his maintenance worker's clothes, and he is on Chris's territory in front of Chris's students with every social and physical advantage in the room pointing against him. And yet, from the moment he speaks, the balance of power in that room is entirely his. He does not threaten, he does not display, he does not name his capabilities or reference the previous night. He simply presents what he wants. A truce and agreement Daniel left alone until the Ore Valley tournament with the serenity of someone who has already decided how this is going to end and is simply allowing Chris to catch up. Chris agrees. And here is what that agreement reveals. Chris can read power. He knows exactly what he is looking at when he looks at Mr. Miyagi. He is not deceived by the work clothes or the quiet manner. He sees through all of it to the thing underneath, and he backs down, not because he is afraid exactly, but because he recognizes that this is not a fight he would enjoy having. And the most chilling thing about that recognition is what it tells you about every choice Chris subsequently makes with his students. He knows the difference between genuine mastery and aggressive performance. He knows Miyagi's philosophy is the deeper one. He has looked directly at it and chosen to teach the opposite anyway. That is not ignorance, that is a deliberate knowing rejection of the better path. And the students who suffer for that rejection, Johnny, Bobby, Tommy, Dutch, they did not choose this. It was chosen for them by someone who knew better and did not care. Now let us move through the training sequences in their full spoiler context, because every phase of Daniel's training carries layers of meaning that only the complete story allows you to see. The chores begin the morning after Mr. Miyagi agrees to train Daniel wax on, wax off, sand the floor, paint a fence, paint a house. And from a storytelling perspective, what is happening in these sequences is not just the hidden learning narrative mechanism, although that mechanism is brilliant. What is happening is a study in the nature of trust. Daniel does these things, these physically demanding, apparently pointless tasks, because Mr. Miyagi has asked him to, and because, without any particular logical reason to believe in this quiet man with his bonsai trees and his fly-catching chopsticks, Daniel trusts him. That trust is not naive. Daniel questions it. He pushes back. On the third day of painting the house, his patience runs out and he confronts Mr. Miyagi directly. He says he feels used, that this is not training, that this is free labor, and his frustration is completely legitimate from the outside. From where Daniel stands, there is no visible evidence that what he is doing has anything to do with karate. The trust he has extended has not yet been rewarded with any visible return. And this is where Miyagi makes a choice that reveals the depth of his understanding of Daniel. He does not argue. He does not explain. He simply says, "Show me," and throws a punch. And Daniel's arm comes up. Wax on, another punch. Wax off, a chop, sand the floor, a strike from above, fence paint. The body knows things the mind does not yet know. The muscle memory is already there. The trust was not misplaced, it was simply placed in something that works below the level of visibility, below the level where Daniel could see it and assess it and decide in real time whether it was worth continuing. And what this reveals about Mr. Miyagi's philosophy of teaching is something quite profound. He did not tell Daniel what he was learning because knowing what you are learning in the early stages can interfere with the learning. When you know you're practicing a block, you think about it consciously, you perform it, you evaluate it in real time, and all of that cognitive overhead slows the process of the movement finding its way into your body and staying there. But when you think you are waxing a car, your mind is free to find its own relationship with the motion, and the motion sinks in cleanly, without interference. Miyagi understood this. He designed the training around it, and the sophistication of that understanding is the first real glimpse of what kind of teacher this man actually is. There is a detail in these training sequences that only registers fully on close viewing, and it was recently noted in a piece of fan scholarship that I find genuinely illuminating. In the scene in Miyagi's workshop immediately before the Halloween party, there is a collection of random junk hanging on the workshop wall behind Miyagi and Daniel as they talk. Among that junk, if you pause the frame at the right moment, you can see the outline of a makeshift shower curtain hanging on a hook, an object that foreshadows, in the most casual and undemonstrative way possible, the costume Daniel will wear to the Halloween party that night. It is not a planted Easter egg in the modern sense, it is the natural accumulation of a lived in environment that happens to rhyme with what is coming. And the fact that it is there unannounced is a small demonstration of the kind of observational care that went into constructing this film's world. Let us talk about the birthday scene in the full depth it deserves, because it is the emotional heart of the film, and I do not think it gets enough credit for how much it accomplishes in such a small space. Daniel arrived at the apartment complex on his birthday, expecting to find nothing special waiting for him. He has been in Reseda long enough to know that he does not yet have the kind of friendships that fill a birthday with noise and people. He's 16 and he is going to spend his birthday the way lonely people spend their birthdays, quietly, hoping no one notices, trying not to mind. And then Mr. Miyagi appears, and he has prepared something. The car, a 1947 Ford Super Deluxe, dutifully restored, gleaming in the garage, is not just a birthday gift. It is a statement about who Daniel is in Mr. Miyagi's eyes. Miyagi did not buy Daniel something practical. He did not give him something useful for karate training. He gave him something beautiful, something that says, you are a person who deserves beautiful things, not just functional ones. You are a person whose birthday is worth marking with something that required thought and care and time. You are seen. And then Miyagi gets drunk. And Daniel finds him, and what follows is the scene that Pat Morita later said was the most important scene in the film for understanding who Mr. Miyagi truly was. Not the training sequences, not the tournament, but this moment of unguarded grief in the dark. The facts, as Miyagi tells them in fragments, are devastating in their specificity. His wife Yuki was pregnant. She was in the Heart Mountain internment camp in Wyoming, one of the 10 internment camps where the United States government imprisoned approximately 120,000 Japanese Americans during World War II, the vast majority of whom were American citizens who had committed no crime. Miyagi himself was serving in Italy with the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, fighting for the country that had imprisoned his family. He was decorated for valor. He came home to find that his wife had died in childbirth inside a prison camp while he was winning medals for the government that put her there. This is not backstory. This is not context. This is the key that unlocks Mr. Miyagi entirely. Every choice he has made, the patience, the restraint, the insistence on the philosophical dimensions of martial arts, the refusal to use violence except in direct defense, the deep tenderness with which he approaches Daniel's loneliness, all of it is a response to this history. He has lived through a kind of injustice so profound and survived it with his humanity intact, and the only way to understand how he managed that is to understand that he chose, somewhere in himself, not to become what was done to him. He chose patience when rage was available. He chose gentleness when bitterness was justified. He chose to build when destruction would have been understandable. And when Morita plays this scene, when he sits there in his kitchen weeping and drinking, telling a teenage boy things he has probably never told anyone, in broken sentences that keep losing their thread, he is not performing grief. He is delivering something that his own life had prepared him for in ways no acting technique could replicate. But Morita spent time in a sanitarium as a child due to spinal tuberculosis, was placed in a series of institutions, grew up with a deep understanding of what it meant to be confined, to be defined by systems that had no particular interest in who you actually were. When he plays a man broken by institutional violence and loss, he is drawing on a well that is his own. The Academy nominated him for Best Supporting Actor for this performance. He did not win. The award went to Hang S. in Gore for The Killing Fields. In any other year, the nomination would have been the win. This remains one of the great what ifs of Oscar history. Now let us walk through the tournament in the fullest spoiler detail because it is constructed with a precision that rewards close examination. The 1984 All Valley Karate Championship takes place on December 19, a detail established in the franchise's later documentation and consistent with the film's internal timeline. Daniel is the unknown, the anomaly, the kid from a dojo nobody has heard of, trained by a maintenance man with less than 6 months of formal training. The Cobra Kai students have been training for years under a decorated, if morally bankrupt, instructor. By any rational calculation, Daniel should not be here. He should certainly not be winning matches. And yet, match by match, he advances. What strikes me about Daniel's fighting style in the tournament, particularly on close viewing with the benefit of understanding what Miyagi-Do is designed to be, is how much of it is invisible. He is not fighting with the aggressive attacking energy of the Cobra Kai students. He is doing something much subtler. He is waiting, reading, deflecting, and only striking when the opening is already there rather than forcing the opening into existence. His style is almost anti-style, a method that looks like it is barely doing anything until suddenly it has done everything. Bobby's knee strike, ordered by Chris in the semi-final, is the moral climax of the tournament sequence, even though it is not the physical climax, because in the moment Chris leans over and says, "Put him out of commission," the film's entire argument about Cobra Kai's true nature is stated in the clearest possible terms. This is not a sensei pushing a student to compete at their highest level. This is a general ordering a soldier to commit an act that everyone in the arena recognizes as wrong. The referee's face, the crowd's reaction, Bobby's own horrified hesitation. Everyone present can see what this is. And Chris orders it anyway, because in Chris's philosophy, the distinction between competing and destroying, between winning and harming, has been deliberately erased. Winning is the only value. Everything else is sentiment. Bobby follows the order, and he will carry that for the rest of his life, which is exactly what the Cobra Kai series later shows us he does. The students who followed Chris's worst orders are not monsters. They are young people who were given a philosophy of cruelty before they were old enough to interrogate it, and who then had to live with the consequences of acting on that philosophy in moments that mattered. That is a tragedy, and this film plants the seed of it with complete precision. In the locker room, with Daniel's knee swollen and the pain evident in every movement, Mr. Miyagi looks at his student and says something quietly extraordinary. He tells Daniel he has already proven himself. He tells him, without quite saying the words, that the point was never the trophy. That Daniel's journey, from the frightened, displaced boy who arrived at the apartment complex to the person sitting here now, is the victory, regardless of what happens in the ring, and he means it. You can see that he means it. And Daniel, who has heard him, who genuinely understands him, says he wants to finish it anyway. This is Daniel's most important moment of choice in the entire film, not a crane kick, this moment, because he is choosing to continue not out of stubbornness, not out of pride, not out of the need to defeat Johnny Lawrence. He is choosing to continue because he has come far enough in his own development to recognize that some things deserve to be completed and that leaving this one unfinished would cost him something he does not want to pay. Mr. Agnews Miyagi's healing of the knee is one of the most debated moments in the film, and I want to address it directly. The studio was reportedly uncomfortable with including it because there was no medical explanation for it, and the concern was that it would undermine the film's realistic grounding and ask too much of the audience's credulity. But the filmmakers kept it, and they were right to keep it, and the reason they were right is precisely because it is unexplained. If they had explained it, if someone had said it's an ancient Japanese technique or it's pressure points or anything at all, they would have reduced it to a trick. By leaving it unexplained, they preserved it as something else entirely, evidence that Mr. Miyagi has gone further down a path of self-mastery than anyone in his ordinary daily life would have reason to suspect, and that at the far end of that path are things that cannot be categorized from the outside. The healing is not magic. It is the logical extreme of the film's central belief that genuine, deep, lifelong mastery of the self produces capacities that ordinary frameworks of understanding cannot accommodate. The final match, Daniel versus Johnny Lawrence, score tied at 2 each. Daniel's knee compromised, his movement restricted, the pain visible in every breath. Johnny, ordered by Chris to show no mercy, is fighting with a controlled aggression that is very close to the edge of what the rules permit. The crowd is tense, with the particular tension of a room full of people watching something they know matters more than it should. And then Daniel assumes the crane stance. I want to slow down here because this moment, the moment Daniel rises on one leg, arms extended, the whole arena going still, is layered in ways that only the full context of the film allows you to feel. We saw this dance for the first time at the beach months earlier in the story when Daniel was practicing alone on a dock post at sunset, experimenting with balance, finding something in the physical form of it that resonated with him in a way he could not quite name. Mr. Miyagi was watching from a distance that day. He did not comment. He simply observed and then later, quietly, began incorporating the crane kata into Daniel's training. The move was never ordered. It was never drilled relentlessly until it became mechanical. It emerged from Daniel's own curiosity, was noticed by Miyagi, and was gently developed into something Daniel could trust. When he assumes the stance in the ring, he is not executing a technique he was programmed to use. He is making a choice that is entirely his own, a choice rooted in something he found by himself, with his own body, on a beach at sunset, before he knew who he was becoming. And that is the deepest meaning of Mr. Miyagi's teaching philosophy. The goal was never to make Daniel into a fighter. The goal was to create conditions in which Daniel could discover what was already in him and then give that thing the support and the form it needed to become real. Now, the question of whether Johnny Lawrence deliberately allows the crane kick to land. This is one of the most genuinely interesting interpretive questions in the film, and it has been an active conversation among fans of the Karate Kid for over 4 decades. The observable fact is straightforward. Johnny Lawrence is a two-time defending All-Valley champion, a trained, experienced fighter who has been watching Daniel fight all day, who knows Daniel's physical limitations, who has had multiple rounds to observe his patterns and tendencies. When Daniel rises into the crane stance, a highly unusual telegraph technique that announces itself with total clarity, there are multiple effective defensive responses available to a fighter of Johnny's caliber. He could sweep the standing leg, he could step back out of range, he could feint and redirect. Instead, he charges directly into it. The most generous reading of this is narrative convenience. The story needed the kick to land, and the filmmakers prioritized emotional logic over martial arts realism. But there is another reading, and the fan theory surrounding it, and the way Cobra Kai later excavated it over 6 seasons, suggest it is worth taking seriously. By the final match, something has shifted in Johnny Lawrence. He has watched Daniel refuse to quit after a deliberately injurious illegal strike. He has watched a boy who should have been finished by every reasonable measure ask Mr. Miyagi to heal his knee and then go back out onto the floor. He has watched someone fight with a quality that the Cobra Kai philosophy has no word for, a quality that is something like integrity, something like the understanding that the thing you are fighting for is more important than your own safety or comfort. And somewhere in Johnny, underneath the years of Crease's conditioning, underneath the aggression and the arrogance and the two consecutive championships, and all the social identity that rests on being the best, something recognizes this, something that was in him before Kreese got to it, something that knows the difference between a real fighter and the performed one, between genuine strength and borrowed power. When the crane kick comes, Johnny Lawrence does not move, whether that is because he could not react in time or because he chose not to. The result is the same. He accepts it. And in accepting it, he does something that the Cobra Kai philosophy declares impossible. He shows respect. Johnny presents the trophy to Daniel himself. His exact words spoken quietly, with the anger gone and something else in its place. "You're all right, LaRusso." 3 words, 2 syllables each. And in those words, everything Chris taught him falls away for a moment, and you see the person underneath. Someone who, if the circumstances of his adolescence had been even slightly different, might have been Daniel's friend rather than his tormentor. This moment was the foundation upon which an entire 6-season television series was built, and it earns that foundation completely because it is already there, complete, in the original film. You do not need Cobra Kai to read it. It is present in William Zabka's face, in the economy of those 3 words, in the fraction of a second of quiet between Daniel's victory and the crowd's eruption, a fraction of a second in which Johnny Lawrence stands in the ring, alone with what has just happened, and becomes something more complicated than a villain. The final image. The camera finds Mr. Miyagi in the crowd, and Daniel finds him at the same moment, and across the distance of the arena floor, across the noise and the celebration, they look at each other. And it is important to say what that look is not. It is not pride, or not only pride. It is not triumph, or not primarily triumph. It is the look of two people found each other in a difficult moment and chose to remain, and who are now standing in the evidence of what that choice produced. It is a look of recognition, of completion, of the quiet, specific happiness that comes from having done something together that neither could have done alone. There is no embrace, there is no speech, there are no words, just the look. And then the frame fills with celebrating people, and the credits begin to roll, and the film ends as it lived, precise, honest, and trusting you to feel the full weight of what it has said without having it summarized for you. There is one piece of production history connected to the ending that deserves mention here, because it changes the context of what we see. The original screenplay included a scene following the tournament in which Mr. Miyagi and John Cleese had a violent confrontation in the parking lot, a scene that would have resolved the Cleese storyline more completely and given the film's moral argument a more decisive final statement. The scene was filmed. It was then removed from the theatrical and relocated to the beginning of the Car Ticket Part 2, where it appears as the opening sequence. The decision to remove it from the original film was the right decision, even though I understand why it was written. The film's ending does not need Chris to be explicitly defeated or humiliated in order to make its moral point. The moral point has already been made completely by the crane kick and the look and Johnny's 3 words. Adding a parking lot confrontation would have suggested that the story was about defeating Chris, when it was never about Chris at all. It was about Daniel finding his balance. That is where the story ends. Everything else is aftermath. Let me step out of analysis now and just speak to you directly. Let me tell you what this film actually did to me while I was watching it. Not what I thought about it, but what it made me feel. There's a particular kind of emotion and experience that only certain films can produce, and it is different from being entertained or being impressed or being moved by a powerful scene. It is the experience of a film, looking at something true about what it means to be a human being, specifically what it means to be young and uncertain and trying to find your footing in a world that has not made room for you, and saying, "I see this. I know this. You are not alone in this. This is a real thing that real people go through, and you do not have to pretend it is not hard. The karate gave me that experience. It gave it to me the first time I watched it, and it gives it to me every time I return. What struck me most in my most recent viewing, and I have watched this film many times, across many different chapters of my own life, and each time it gives something slightly different, was not the scenes I expected to be moved by. Not the crane kick, not the tournament, not even the birthday scene, though the birthday scene is as good as it has ever been. What struck me most was the smaller moments, the moments that the film does not underline or score with swelling music or frame as significant. The moment where Daniel is sitting in his new bedroom, surrounded by unpacked boxes. He has been in this apartment for less than a week. He does not know anyone. He does not know the codes of this place, its rhythms, its unwritten rules. And you can see in the particular way he is sitting, the slight roundedness of the shoulders, the stillness that is not peace but held tension, the body language of someone who has been placed in a situation they did not choose and are trying to figure out how to survive it. There is no music in this scene. There is no dialogue to tell you how to feel about it. There is just a boy in a room full of boxes, and the specific loneliness of it is completely true. And if you have ever moved somewhere new at a vulnerable time in your life, you feel it in your chest the moment you see it, the moment where Mr. Mons Miyagi asked quietly by Daniel whether he ever thinks about getting married again, simply does not answer. He sets down whatever he is holding. He looks at the bonsai tree in front of him. He dents the tree. The silence goes on long enough to be its own answer, and it is an answer so full of contained grief that the film does not need to do anything else with it. He does not say, I still love Yuki. He does not say, I have not yet forgiven myself for being in Italy when she needed me. He says nothing, and the nothing says everything. And this is the part that I keep coming back to. The film understands what it means to carry loss quietly. Not dramatically, not with outward suffering that announces itself and asks for acknowledgement, but quietly, in the texture of your daily life, in the way you tend your bonsai trees with more care than seems strictly necessary, in the specific quality of patience you develop when you have learned that time does not heal so much as it teaches you to carry. Did this film shift my perspective on anything? Yes, every viewing shifts my perspective on what teaching actually is, on the difference between instruction and transformation, on the idea that the most important things you give another person are rarely the things you say. Mr. Miyagi does not lecture Daniel about discipline. He lets Daniel discover discipline through physical labor. He does not tell Daniel that balance is the key to everything. He places Daniel in situations where the absence of balance has immediate physical consequences and lets Daniel feel his way toward it. He trusts that given the right conditions, the right patient presence, the right consistent warmth, the thing that needs to grow in Daniel will grow. And it does. The moment that personally stayed with me, the one I carried out of this viewing and into my days, was not the crane kick, as iconic and earned as that moment is. It was a smaller moment that comes near the end of the birthday scene, after Miyagi has given Daniel the car, and Daniel's gratitude is almost too big to contain. Daniel looks at Mr. Miyagi, this man he barely knows, this quiet person who has been steadily, consistently present in his life for a few weeks without ever asking anything in return. And you can see in his face the moment he realizes something he did not realize before, that he is loved, not chosen for any particular quality, not valued for what he can do or become, not loved conditionally on his performance or his potential. Simply loved, because he is here and he is Daniel, and that is enough. There is nothing in Daniel's face in that moment that needs to be explained. The film simply holds it for a second and then moves on. And it is, to me, the most quietly extraordinary second in the whole film, because it captures something true about what it means to be seen by another person, fully, without reservation, without agenda, and recognized as worthy of care. This is not a dramatic epiphany. It does not resolve anything. It does not make Daniel's problems smaller or his journey easier. It simply gives him, for the first time since he arrived in Lazada, the feeling that there is someone in this place who is glad he exists, and that is everything. That is the thing that makes everything else possible. Would I watch this film again? Without question. I will watch it many more times in the years ahead, and each time I will find something I did not find the time before. I first encountered this film as a child and connected with Daniel's outsider status and his improbable victory. I watched it as an adolescent and connected with the training, with the idea that discipline applied consistently could produce capabilities that seemed impossible at the outset. I watched it as a young adult and found myself unexpectedly arrested by the relationship between Daniel and Mr. Miyagi. The gentleness of it, the completeness of it, the way it represents something about mentorship and care that most people only understand in retrospect, when they are old enough to recognize what someone gave them when they were too young to have words for it. And I expect that the next time I watch it, and the time after that, I will find another layer, another truth, another anger from which the light falls differently on something I thought I had already understood. This is what the best films do. They do not give you everything at once. They give you what you are ready for, and then they wait. The viewer who connects with this film most deeply, the person this film was always speaking to in its most essential voice, is anyone who has ever been the new person somewhere. Anyone who has ever walked into a room where the rules were already established and no one thought to share them with you. Anyone who has ever been helped by someone who had no obligation to help them but showed up anyway, consistently, without making a point of it. Anyone who has found in the most unexpected person the thing they most needed. Not advice, not solutions, not a plan, but presence. Patient, consistent, unfailingly kind presence. If any part of that description lands for you, this film is for you. It was always for you. It has been waiting for you to arrive at it, and it will still be here when you bring it to someone you love. So here is where we land, and I want to take my time with this because the verdict on a film like this deserves the same care the film itself extends to everything it touches. The Karate Kid is, in the most precise sense I know how to use, an essential film, not a perfect film. We have been honest about where it falls short, and those shortcomings are real. Not the most visually ambitious film, not the most formally complex, not the most narratively surprising. None of those things. But essential in the way that only a handful of films in any generation manage to be essential. Films that take a fundamental human experience and render it with such precision, such warmth, such complete emotional intelligence that they become part of the shared inner life of everyone who encounters them. Who loved this film most? Anyone who has been displaced and found their footing slowly in unexpected places through unexpected paces, through unexpected people. Anyone who has had a real mentor, someone who showed up without being asked and stayed without being thanked and changed you in ways you only fully understood later. Anyone who values cinema, that trusts silence, that trusts performance, that trusts you to feel things without being instructed in how to feel them. Anyone who believes that decency is a form of power, perhaps the deepest form of power, and that restraint is not the same as weakness. Anyone, aged 8 to 80, who has ever needed to be reminded that balance is possible, even when nothing around you supports it, especially then, who might struggle with it. Anyone who needs their films to move at the pace of contemporary action cinema will find the second act's gentle rhythms a test of patience. Anyone who has been so fully absorbed by Cobra Kai's morally complex portrait of Johnny Lawrence that watching him as a straightforward antagonist again produces cognitive dissonance, which is a completely legitimate experience of the franchise at this point. And anyone who is allergic to sentiment, to the honest, earned, unironic emotional warmth that this film wraps around its central relationships, will find it difficult to fully surrender to. Though I would argue that the resistance to earned sentiment tells you more about the viewer than it tells you about the film. Is it worth seeking out, worth watching on streaming, worth adding to a shelf you return to? Yes, to all three. But more than any of those, this is a film worth watching with someone you love. It is a communal film in the best sense of that word. It was built for rooms where people are present together, and it rewards that presence. It generates the kind of collective emotional experience, shared laughter, shared tension, shared feeling, that reminds you of why cinema exists in the first place. Put it on a good screen, make time for it, be present with it. It will be present with it. It will be present with you. My rating for The Karate Kid, 9 out of 10. 9 because this is a film that does not merely succeed, it endures. It has been earning its place in the permanent conversation about what cinema can be and do and feel like at its best for over 40 years, and there is no sign that it intends to stop. The crane kick still lands. The birthday scene still breaks you open in the gentlest possible way. Mr. Miyagi still makes you want to be better, more patient, more present, more willing to show up for someone who needs you without making them feel the cost of your showing up. 9 out of 10 because this film gave me something I could not have named before I found it here, and because the films that give you things you did not know you needed are the ones that matter most. The Karate Kid understood something that most films never even try to reach. It understood that the most powerful thing a story can do is not amaze you or excite you or impress you. It is to make you feel quietly and completely that you are not alone. And it does that. 42 years of audiences can confirm it does exactly that. And that is our time together on this one. But before I go, I want to say something that I genuinely mean and not just as a scripted closing. Thank you. Thank you for being here, for making the time, for choosing to spend part of your day in a conversation about a film that deserves this kind of attention. The fact that you are here, watching a channel built around the belief that cinema deserves to be taken seriously and felt deeply and talked about with care, that matters to me more than the numbers ever will. If this essay resonated with you, if it made you see the film differently, or sent you back to it with new eyes, or made you want to pick up the phone and watch it with someone, please leave a comment and let me know. Not because the algorithm likes comments, although it does, because I genuinely want to hear from you. I read every single response, and the conversations that happen in the comment section of this channel are some of the richest film conversations I am part of. And since we have been so deep in this film today, here are three specific things I want to know from you. First, do you believe, watching that final moment in the ring, that Johnny Lawrence deliberately allowed the crane kick to land, not as a convenient plot device, but as a genuine character choice? A boy underneath the Cobra Kai conditioning who recognized something in Daniel that deserved to win? I have a position on this and I want to know if it matches yours. Second, if you could have had a Mr. Miyagi in your own life, someone who taught you something important through something that did not look like teaching, who was that person for you? Because I think everyone who loves this film loves it partly because it maps onto a real relationship they have had or longed for, and I want to hear about yours. And third, now that the Cobra Kai series has ended and Karate Kid Legends has extended the franchise into yet another generation, where does this original 1984 film rank for you within everything this universe has produced? Because my answer might surprise you, and I think the conversation about that ranking is one worth having. Leave those thoughts below. Share this essay with someone who loves film the way you do. It like if this is the kind of cinema conversation you want to see more of, it genuinely helps this channel reach the audience it was built for. And if you are not yet subscribed to the Cine Flux, this is your moment. New essays like this one are coming regularly and you do not want to miss them. Next time on the Cine Flux, we are going somewhere you may not expect. A film with a visual language that operates almost entirely through implication rather than statement, a story told in negative space as much as in what appears on screen, and a central performance that I would place among the 5 best of the decade in which it was made. It is a film that rewards patience in the way that only films built with complete conviction in their own vision can reward patience. And I think our conversation about it is going to be one of the best we have had on this channel. Be there, I will be waiting. That is the Cine Flux. I will see you in the next one.